talked a lot about love and relationships, and Amy was asking, what are your favorite ways to deepen relationships remotely?
So if you had asked me this a couple of years ago, I would have said I'm not entirely sure that's possible. But but now, because we've all been forced to learn how to be more comfortable remotely, I actually don't know if there's most of what I would do remotely is probably pretty similar to what I would do in person. I think the 36 questions and variations of those are so fun to play with, and they can be done remotely. Probably the one big difference that I feel is that in order for people to deepen into any kind of relationship, you need to have a combination of vulnerability and progressive disclosure, right? Those are the magical elements. So the question is, how do you create the psychological safety in the virtual space to feel comfortable being vulnerable, and then progressively over time through conversation, reveal more and be more open and more honest? And a lot of that has to do with, I think, feeling really comfortable in the platforms, feeling comfortable in the space. And a lot of times also that just gets created by starting fairly shallow, and then easing your way into a little, sharing a little bit more, and a little bit more, a little bit more. And I think also having platforms like this where you can see the person, when we produce a podcast now, we use a platform where we don't actually record and air the video, but we use video while we're recording. And that is entirely so that we can create the safety and the nuance of rapport. And I can actually respond to a lot of nonverbal cues that allow the relationship to get a lot deeper, a lot faster. So I think there are a lot of little things that you can do, but technology has enabled so much more than I ever thought was possible.
Jonathan, I have some questions for you, buddy, from other people. Someone was talking about how I'm intrigued by how the brain differentiates between friendship experiences online versus in person. And we'd love to hear your thoughts or any research about how those two things would be different and how you would approach those two things differently.
Yeah, it is a really fascinating question. I've done a little bit of work on it, and I've had the opportunity to sit down with people like Sherry Turkle, who's done a whole bunch of research on the effect of screen-based interactions on friendship, and on and also on the exact opposite of that, and on the effect of technology's asynchronous nature of conversations and how that affects our ability to make friends. And so there's a couple of different factors. And again, I'm not a neuroscientist. So these have been my observations. And this is what I've learned, having the opportunity to actually sit down with people who are primary researchers in these areas, is that, I think there are, on the one hand, the screen can be incredibly powerful because it flattens the world. People you would never have met before, you can literally just open up a window and see them. And the ability to actually see all of the nonverbal communication, which is the vast majority of the way that we actually pick up information about other people, is incredibly powerful. When communication goes to the virtual domain and there's no video element to it, that can get interesting, right? Because we can't pick up nuance, we can't pick up subtlety. So we don't know if somebody's being sarcastic or self-effacing. We don't know if somebody is being. There's all sorts of nuance that gets left behind. So what do? We try and approximate that with emojis. We've literally created a whole second language with all these characters to try and add, oh, this is what I mean when I'm typing this, or when you see these letters or these words typed. But it really doesn't convey it, because we pick up such subtle cues and facial expressions and body language and breath rates and in the sound and intonation and rhythm of a person's voice, that it makes it more difficult. So when you can actually have conversations like this, where we're hanging out, we can see each other, you have a sense for who I am, and you can see a lot of the physicality of my presence. I think actually you can get pretty close. But when you take a screen and you put it in the middle of it, there's no visual reference, and then there's no audio reference, and it's just text-based. That's where things can get a little bit more complicated, we lose nuance. And what some of the research shows is we also lose empathy. It's harder for us to empathize with somebody else when it's purely a text-based conversation. And there's another thing which is less intuitive, which is that whether it's text or social media or DMs, like which is sort of like overtaking text and stuff like that, it is an asynchronous form of conversation, meaning it's not happening in real time. Like if you and I are having a conversation and I say, "Hey man, how are you?" Right? You're not going to sit there and say, let me see. How should I answer this? Wait. Let me ask 3 friends, like, what's the best way to answer this question? Let me formulate my answer and then respond to Jonathan. Like that doesn't happen when we're just hanging out, having a conversation. That happens all day, every day in the context of DMs and texts. They're asynchronous. And what happens is the conversations become much more planned. They're not spontaneous. And when we lose the spontaneity, we also lose a certain amount of vulnerability. And vulnerability is the source fuel for friendship. So there's something which allows us to
love that connection, man. I love that connection between spontaneity and vulnerability. That's so true. You lose that a little bit with texting or DMing or emails or even sometimes like any asynchronous. You're losing that. Like, oh, let me share this because you just shared that, or I feel this way, because really you don't feel that way anymore. Now you're responding to something, so you're thinking that way, but you're not feeling sometimes too. That's powerful.
Yeah, it's like so maybe you're a little safer. You won't mess up as much, but you also won't connect as much.
Yeah, I love that. Evelia is asking, how do you help a college student whose transition to college has made her depressed and anxious? She's always been grounded, loved school, very athletic and very confident, loved by all, but now she's coming home on mental health leave. And I know it's a big question, but perhaps even just like where to start.
Yeah, and this is a very, very common question, especially these days, especially at this particular moment in time. Let me be super clear. I am not a mental health professional. And I think the absolute starting point for this is, in fact, to bring a mental health professional or a team of people into this conversation as early as humanly possible, whether that is through the school, whether it's through your own efforts or some combination of that. I think like for somebody who's struggling on that level, and that is absolutely not an unusual story at this moment in time. Yeah. It's really important not to actually rely on folks like me to sort of like provide the answers, but that those are the moments where go to a qualified mental health professional, bring them into the conversation and allow them to guide a lot of the decision-making process, and really let you figure out like what is the most appropriate course of action for my particular kid at this moment in time.
This can be your day for personal growth. This can be that day you committed to and you remember and you go, that was the day I got myself a community. I got better coaches. I committed to making my life the absolute best that I could. This is that day. Make today your growth day. Click the button on this page and sign up right now.